books today. So we have Objective 22, which is located in the comprehensive plan. And basically, the idea of that commercial locational criteria was to allow residents to meet their daily needs for goods and services within a reasonable distance from their neighborhoods. And the idea too was that those commercial activities could be integrated into the neighborhoods. And when we say integrated, we don't mean that they're going to be inside the subdivisions, but that there are going to be connections so that people don't have to drive necessarily to these places. And before I continue, did we mention that we were recording? I don't think we have mentioned that before, but
Andrew and I were just chatting. We did not. That was my bad. I do apologize. This meeting is being recorded. I should have said that in the beginning.
And I
Thank
put
you.
it in the chat.
All right, thank you. So yeah, when we say integrated, doesn't mean that we're going to all of a sudden put a 7-Eleven inside a subdivision. It would be in the periphery of the subdivision, but close enough for people to go there if they need to. And when this was set up, it was set up as an incentive, because the beauty of this was that people would not have to change the future land use map of the county. They would only require a rezoning. So, everybody else, if they want to do, regular commercial, they would have to rezone and then, also change the future land use map. So it's a lengthy and expensive process. So this would allow for these daily needs establishments to skip the plan amendment and go to the rezoning. And whether it's a comprehensive plan amendment or a rezoning, they always require a public hearing. So we'll keep that in mind. So when we talk about neighborhood commercial, this has been an issue that we've been talking with different people. So the idea was not to open up the doors for any commercial. The idea was to allow for neighborhood serving commercial to locate within residential areas. So we're talking about grocery stores, we're talking about the hairdresser, the CVS, the Panera, down the street, or the local restaurant. So we created this graphic to give you an idea of how it works today. So right now in the books, it says that you could be either in a rural agriculture area or rural residential area. So that's the bottom right. Or you could be in an area that it's kind of transitioning from rural to suburban, but it's still very, very low density. It's 2-acre lots. That's the bottom left. On the top right, it's assuming that you're going to be in a suburban area, normally 4 to 6 units per acre, or a mixed use area. And the top left is the very urban area. That's where you start seeing, and I forget that I have pictures to depict that. So that's the rural area. That's what you normally see. The 2-acre lot area, that's what you would see. Your suburban areas, your subdivisions, you start seeing cul-de-sacs, gated entrances. And then for the urban areas, the townhouses, the apartments, the denser part of the county. So today, if you're in the rural residential area or rural agricultural area, Objective 22 says that if you're anywhere between 300 to 660 feet from an intersection, and this would be an intersection that appears on a map, then you would be able to have about anywhere from 5,000 to 40,000 square feet of commercial. It doesn't say neighborhood commercial, it just says, commercial. So the 5,000 is only if you're at the intersection of a major local road. And those are the roads that do not appear on the official map that the rest of the development would be allowed. So 5,000 square feet, we're talking about maybe a Wawa or a racetrack or a 7-Eleven or a McDonald's, Burger King. That's about the size that you would see there. But when you open it up to 40,000 square feet in the rural residential area agriculture, now you start talking about you could potentially have a neighborhood Walmart in those areas. So that's for the rural area. Now for the 2-acre lot area, if you're anywhere between 300 and 900 feet from the intersection, you could have kind of similar, starting with 5,000, but in this case, it lets you go up to 110,000 square feet. So for us, when you have 2-acre lots, we felt that that was a flag. So the smaller uses that you would see could be like your McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, but at 110,000 square feet, you could potentially see a Home Depot or a furniture store, a big box, pretty much. Top right. So now we're in the suburban area, subdivisions. The distance is similar, 300 to 900. The bottom part, the 5,000 is, the maximum you could have if you have a major local road. We're not talking about arterials, collectors, or, the bigger roads. But in this case, you could go up to 175,000 square feet. Now we're talking about anywhere from your regular gas station to a Sam's Club. And we're talking about in a residential designated area. So if you look at the future land use map, if you're new to the county, you want to move to the county, and you look at the map and you go, oh, this is going to be a nice residential area. Not knowing that at certain intersections, you could have a Sam's Club or a BJ's or a Costco. Then in the urban area, where you have anywhere from 9 to 35 units per acre, the distance gets longer, anywhere from 300 to 1,000 lineal feet. And the small one still at 5,000, but the big one is also at 175,000 square feet. So that's your super target that we're talking about. So when we went through this exercise, a lot of flags were raised, a lot of questions came up. Do we really need to have a neighborhood Walmart next to the rural areas, or can we afford to have like Home Depots next to 2-acre lots? So, with that in mind, we started thinking, okay, so number one, there are different types of commercial. There's neighborhood commercial. That's intended to serve just the immediate area. There's community commercial, which serves several neighborhoods. And then there is regional commercial, which is supposed to serve the whole county or even counties adjacent. And at the same time, we also have to think that there may be neighborhood commercial in an urban area, which is going to look very different than what it should look like in a suburban or rural area. Same thing for community, same thing for regional. So here we just have some examples of what we would identify as an urban neighborhood store, a Foxtail Cafe. A community-sized urban development, it's a very urban Publix. A regional use could be like a mall or an IKEA, or but it would still be in an urban area. For suburban, same types of uses, but this is normally what they would look like. And for the rural, we see that you may have some neighborhood commercial, you may have some community commercial, but it would be very strange if you find a regional commercial establishment in a rural area. So we don't see the need for that. So we're gonna, that's up until this point is what we have in the books today. Now, in terms of the public engagement, when we started this process, we had come up with a number of meetings that we were going to have on a project website. So for the project website, we actually have had two ways of getting into this website: through the specific address for the project or through the Planning Commission's website. In this website, we had a survey and we had a community idea wall where people had an opportunity to go in and just give us comments. Then in addition to that, we had a lot of other ways that we tried to reach out to the public. We had newspaper advertisements, social media, communications through the county. We tried really hard, and we understand that for a lot of people, when you say commercial locational criteria comprehensive plan, it's like, do I really want to spend my afternoon attending one of these meetings? So we really appreciate that you guys are here. In terms of the meetings that we have had 12 individual interviews with the Board of County Commissioners. We had one group meeting with the Planning Commission where we were asking questions. And then since then, we have had 2 briefings. We have had, with this meeting, it's going to be 4 community meetings. We have meetings with county staff, and we had stakeholder interviews. So originally, we scheduled the stakeholder interviews with 3 groups. One was mostly the development community. Group B was transportation advocates and organizations. And Group C, we notify homeowners associations, advocates, people that we knew that were active in the community. So that, I think it was like 800 emails that went out inviting out people to come to this meeting. And then we also had another one more recently with another group that requested a meeting. And on top of all this, Melissa and Andrea have been available for questions through phone calls, emails, and they have been getting some of that too. So what have we heard from the public so far? So whenever we talk about accessibility and connectivity to the surrounding neighborhoods, people say that they wanted that to be context sensitive. So if you have an existing subdivision, we're not going to all of a sudden say, oh, sorry, guys, we're going to put a road right here through this green area that you have, or we're going to connect the 7-Eleven to your subdivision. We're not going to do that. If it is a brand new subdivision, we're going to ask them to design it in a way that the people who live there can walk to the convenience store. Another comment that we heard was that there are some communities in the county who have to go a long distance to meet their daily needs. And we're not talking about the rural area, because we know that that's a life choice, that some people don't mind being far away from Publix, for example. But there are some communities that need to be closer to daily needs, and they're not. So they wanted to make sure that we have a way to get to them. We found out that people are willing to walk. A lot of people say, oh, Florida, there's no way I'm going to walk to the store. If you have shaded sidewalks, safe sidewalks, pedestrian friendly walkways, people will walk. Another comment that we heard over and over and over again is that we have community plans specific to different parts of the county. Those will prevail. We're not trying to change anything in those plans. If somebody comes in with a proposal to do commercial and the community plan specifically states no commercial anywhere but this intersection, well, that will be the direction for the Planning Commission. And the last point has something to do with what I mentioned before, that rezonings have public hearings, comprehensive plan amendments have public hearings. The communities still want to have a say on how this is implemented. So we're not trying to take that away. Okay, so for the next few slides, it's going to be a little bit painful, but we just don't want to miss anything. We want people to be informed on what we're trying to do. So this objective 22 has a list of a bunch of policies, pages and pages of policies. And we want to, based on the different topics addressed in those policies, we want to explain what it is that we're changing. So starting with applicability. So who do we apply this CLC to? Right now, the way the objective is written, the purpose of it ended up in like policy number 2, not 1, not the objective. So we want to make sure that it is clear that the intent of that objective is to encourage the provision of the neighborhood scale commercial closer to residents so that they can meet their needs for goods and services. So we just want to make that clear. The next one has to do with the uses. So I mentioned before that right now it's like commercial, and staff had to figure out, okay, commercial, what does that mean? Oh, let's relate that to a zoning district and just let's use that list. Unintended consequences, some of those lists include uses that are not really neighborhood commercial. So we want to fix that. We want to make sure that when we're talking about neighborhood commercial, something that we're going to put close to residents, that it's the type of use that would be most appropriate for them. The next category has to do with the location. So today, the way that it is written, we base it on a map. Now, this map, number 1, has been outdated, and number 2 includes a lot of intersections. Some people may think it's only major intersections in the county. No, it includes a lot of intersections that would qualify for this. We want to change that map to use a very different map that deals with the character of the area, not so much with, the number of lanes or, whether it's an arterial or a collector. We want to base it on a map that the county prepared that says, these are rural roads, these are suburban roads, these are urban roads. So that way the use matches the character of the area. Next page. So separation. So I mentioned these maps, whichever map we look at, they have a lot of intersections. And let me just make a brief comment here. Nick, it's pounding here, rain. If I lose electricity for any reason, be ready to take over.
I'm already prepared. I got it.
Okay, so the node separation. So I mentioned that there are a lot of intersections, and we don't want every intersection to turn into a commercial node, because pretty soon we're going to have corridors and corridors of commercial. And I know that the market has a lot to do on where people locate commercial, but that's not the intent of this objective. The intent is to create nodes within a certain distance from each other. So we're still discussing how we're going to do that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it in a minute. The next one has to do with the fact that, remember, we said that in some areas you can do 175,000 square feet, and it's, it invites the small IKEA or the Home Depot or the super Target, but that was not the intent. So instead of just reducing the whole square footage, we're proposing to use a limitation on the tenant size. So in each individual establishment, if we're thinking neighborhood commercial, they should not exceed 20,000 square feet. Now, if it is a grocery store, because we want to encourage grocery stores, we're going to let those be up to 50,000 square feet. And that would be your smaller scale Publix, not the super, super big Publix. I think I messed up. I'm not looking at the, I think the previous one had to do with the scale of commercial uses. Oh, no, yeah, that was it. Now, the next one has to do with limitation per corner. So if you're at a corner, we have a maximum size for the entire corner. So it's not just a Publix locating there. It could be a small shopping center that includes the Publix and the restaurants and the drugstores and the banks and everything else that would be included now in a shopping center. One more. So waivers. So right now, the objective says that people can request a waiver, and the waivers that are offered today have to do with the location and the distance from the intersection. And it has been interesting because staff has been getting a lot of these requests. And when you get a lot of these requests, it's like something must be wrong with the language. I mean, why are we getting these requests? So we're making the locational part different, making the intersection criteria different, but instead we're offering waivers to some of the design requirements that we're going to be talking about, and the node separation. Because let's say that a node is existing. So the way we apply the node separation is that if you have an existing node and a new one wants to come in, let's say the new one is going to be 1/4 mile away, we're going to say, sorry, no, you're too close. What about a 1/2 mile away? Sorry, you're too close. What about a mile away? Well, that may be appropriate. So when that new node comes in there, that would meet the separation requirement. Now, what if they want to come in at 1/2 mile? And the justification is that the one that is existing doesn't have a grocery store. Or maybe the one that is existing, because it was based on previous language, maybe it's a Home Depot. It doesn't serve any of the neighborhood uses that we want so bad. So we're inserting language to address waivers. I think we have a hand raised. I'm wondering if that's a question, or do you want to try that, Nick?
It is a question, so I'll defer it up to you if you want to answer that question now, but I mentioned in the chat earlier that we would be generally leaving that to the end of the presentation.
Yeah, let's try the question now. If it gets too lengthy, we'll come back to it, but what is the question?
Sure, that is from Mr. Weaver, and I'm going to turn on your mic function. So if you want to go ahead and turn on your mic, you should be able to ask a question whenever you're ready.
Can you hear me okay?
Now we can hear you, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Patricia and Nick, for this might wait, quite frankly, but I'm just wondering if the whole waiver subject deserves a little special focus because of the not allowing development or impacts to nearby residents, and it doesn't even limit it to substantial impact. So if it has any impact to nearby residents, and I hard to imagine any even soft, perfectly most wanted retail not having at least some impacts, and it doesn't even say adverse impacts to nearby. And of course, strip development, I think you define it as virtually anything that's not big and or it has its own separate entrance. Therefore, if your strip development definition and your no allowed impacts to nearby residents, do you really have any waiver process?
I don't know if I understood the question. Yeah,
Okay.
Melissa or
Way, unless you create strip, which is I read it was virtually any kind of retail, not at the node per the required limitations, or impacts to the nearby residents. And I'm not sure I've ever seen a project that didn't have at least some minor and sometimes moderate impacts to nearby residents. And it doesn't say adverse impacts to nearby residents. So I'm just wondering if you really have a waiver process. I'll ask if others on the call could unmute. Am I over asking that one, David Mechanic and others?
let's see. Let me
Rod,
let me
I don't follow your question, so.
presenting to building placement and node separation. Yeah, I mean, like this language, this may be a very general statement that we have on the screen, but the idea of the node separation waiver was for the Planning Commission to be able to look at the uses and determine if it would make sense to allow it within a shorter distance. So it's not necessarily just the impacts to the residents or district development. It's we are going to be writing criteria that they could use for allowing a waiver to those two items. So like the building placement, for example, this is where if we have design standards that say the building has to be close to the street, but oh, there is a wetland there, then the Planning Commission could grant a waiver so that they don't have to be up close to the street, they can be behind the wetland.
I'll
And
say
then
at the end. I'll try to integrate the question at the end because the question will be integrated with what we're going to call the North Dale Mabry Theater question of the 15 or 16 retail concentrations in Dale Mabry, about 8 of which are on corners and about 8 of which are not on corners. And the ones not on corners are some of those with the best ponds and walkways and gazebos, and the first theater in Carrollwood, which was the first really community center, all of which are not on the intersections. So the off intersection, multiple nodes between less than a mile, et cetera, we'll get to when we get to the North Dale Mabry. Some of the best was off of the intersections question. But let me just say that to the end, and then we'll talk about the waiver of same. Or the lack of waiver of same because of the impact, any impact, not even adverse, to a nearby resident or resulting in your definition of strip development, which is almost anything not precisely at your corners in your precise boxes, little boxes.
And I'm having a hard time here because it's pounding rain and thundering.
Okay, where you are? Where are you, in Baltimore, DC, or where are you?
I'm in Orlando.
You're
you know, every afternoon it rains here. So
this is my son professoring at UCF. So, okay, I can speak up, and I will after you finish. I'm not going to interrupt. I apologize.
Okay.
I wasn't sure.
No problem.
Nick's email, if he'd like not wait, go ahead and get them all out there by subject matter. So please forgive me for interrupting.
All right, we'll talk later about it. Thank you. Okay, the next one has to do with the fact that when we were working on these changes, we said, okay, so no community commercial, no regional commercial in residential. And then staff came back and said, okay, so if we don't allow that, where are they going to go? And we said, well, OC20. Well, if you have an R4, 4 units per acre neighborhood, and somebody wants to put a large Publix, and all of a sudden we're going to give them a designation that allows 20 dwelling units per acre, that doesn't make sense. So we realized that there was a need to have a mixed use land use classification that could accommodate those types of commercial. That if you look at your future land use map, if you're moving to the county, you look at the future land use map and you can see where those nodes are that are a little bit more than just neighborhood commercial. So that new district, we'll talk a little bit about that later. Design. So this is what I mentioned before that will be new because we don't have any policies today that address the design of the building or the design of the site. So this is something that because of the neighborhood, community, regional, urban, suburban, rural chart that we saw before, we see a need to address design. The connectivity is just so that neighbors have a way of getting there safely. And of course, the community plans, we are specifically stating in the language that the community plans would prevail. If somebody comes in and requests a rezoning to do commercial. Now, this table is a summary of what we're putting into the draft, and I'm not going to go through it in detail, but it's just to let you know that we have separated the land use categories based on intensity. So all the ag and very low residential allow less than the 2-acre lot area than the 4 to 9 dwelling units per acre. So as you move higher in the density and intensity, we allow more flexibility in terms of the uses, in terms of the size of the commercial, in terms of the tenant sizes. And I have a slide here that shows side by side the major differences between what's in the books today. This is what I showed you before. And on the right, I'm going to open what we're proposing today. So what we're proposing is that the current language says that if you're in a rural area, you can do anywhere between 5,000 and 40,000 square feet. We're saying, let's reduce that to 20. When you're in an agricultural area, you don't really need the big neighborhood uses. For the 2-acre lot areas, again, we're going from a range of 5,000 to 110,000. We're going to reduce that to 50,000 square feet. Looking at the suburban area, we are increasing the distance requirement from 900 to 1,000. So that's the distance from the intersection. We are reducing the maximum size of commercial from 175 to 110. And then we are adding the restriction for establishment size. 20,000 for any type of establishment, 50,000 allowed for grocery stores, and that's the same for the urban area. So those are the major differences between what's in the books today and what we're proposing. We talked about maps before, and this can look a little bit convoluted. You're not going to be able to figure out, where your house is, on this map. But this is the map that we're proposing to use. So that if you say that you are on a suburban commercial road intersected by a suburban residential road, then it determines, how big your development, how the design should be, how close your building has to be to the street, those types of details. So this map is adopted, is available or will be available on the website so people can go in and determine where they're located. Now we talked about separation of nodes, and this is something that we have been going back and forth. At first we said anything in the rural area, let's make it 2 miles. Anything in the urban area, let's make it 1 mile. But we started experimenting with the different categories of roadways and trying to see, where it would make more sense to have that separation and where we don't need that separation. So like, for example, if you have a suburban commercial roadway intersecting a suburban commercial roadway, maybe you don't need a distance separation between nodes. But then again, if you have a major local road intersecting a major local road, you could not do it in that location. So as you can see, anything that is rural, it's 2 miles all the way across. And we can come back to this later if you guys need to do that. In terms of the design, so we're proposing some changes because we have noticed that the fact that we have a lot of suburban development doesn't mean that we need to continue having suburban development. Suburban development is not friendly to people. It's friendly to cars. And we can see it here. This is an actual sidewalk that connects a neighborhood to a node. There is a grocery store and a drugstore at this corner. But as a pedestrian, you do not feel safe going there. And this is the bottom picture shows, it's going to show you a simulation of how you can really transform suburbia into a more walkable space. So this is somewhere in Southwest Florida, I think. So your typical state roadway going through town. If you start using landscaping, medians, nicer, wider sidewalks, start providing shade, people start really using those sidewalks. And also notice the distance of between the buildings and the street. When the buildings are closer to the street, they start framing that space and giving you a better sense of safety and comfort. So that's why we want to propose that if you're in the more urban areas, we want those buildings to come close to the road, to start interacting with the pedestrians. If you're in the rural area, it's a different story. You know, they can be farther away from the road. In terms of site access and circulation, whenever we have existing subdivisions, we're going to have to rely on the public sidewalks. If it is a new subdivision, then we start talking about let's connect through the subdivision with nice sidewalks, maybe bikeways. In terms of compatibility, we want to make sure that if you're going to put a node next to a subdivision, that they're compatible, that we're not going to have all of a sudden, monumental, box next to single family homes. So we're talking about compatibility. And building design, it's, again, if you put a big box with no windows here, that is not friendly to pedestrians. It's not attractive. It's not inviting anybody. So we wanted to address that through building design. More building design issues. Massing has to do with how bulky your building could be. So compare the old, Home Depots or Best Buys, they used to be very, very boxy. If you start breaking those volumes down, even if it is a large building, it looks a lot more to scale with the neighborhoods. In terms of the appearance or the architecture of the facades, that's something that we want to address. Proportion of windows, that's so that we avoid those blind boxes. Of course, landscaping and buffers to soften it up and to make sure that there are no dumpsters making a lot of noise to the neighborhoods nearby, and lighting, of course. And then low impact development policies, related to stormwater and water conservation. Now, for building design, again, it may not be a blanket statement that everybody has to comply, and we'll talk a little bit about this when we get to the discussion part. Maybe it is something that we do in the urban area and not necessarily in the rural area. So that's something that we want to hear from you. So this is the discussion part. So this is where we want to hear from you. So when we talk about design standards, most developers are good about designing nice buildings with the canopies and the, storefronts. But once in a while, you may get some that they're just not doing that. So in terms of, the people that we have in the room today, how do you feel about design standards? Is that something that would we get support from the community when we start talking about establishing design standards for these nodes? And we're talking about just the nodes next to your neighborhoods. And I think I see a hand up.
Yep.
And Nick, you're muted. Okay.
Yep, so that is Elizabeth Belcher. So if you want to put an unmic or mic yourself, there you go. You got it.
Yes. Okay. Actually, I've been wishing for design standards for a long time. Honestly, they're okay. Excuse the language, but they're throwing out a crap, and nothing is hiding it. If you want to put like a storage unit there, fine, but let's make it at least appear with bushes and trees and this, that, and the other thing. And I thought there used to be a law that said that a state law that said that you had to have so many trees per paved parking lot. And I don't see that being enforced. I would like to see if that's still on the books and why isn't it enforced? Because all we have is concrete deserts, basically.
Yeah, and it is not necessarily a state law, but it's local. Every community has that, and they vary in terms of how many trees. But yeah, the county has that. They have landscaping requirements. Yeah.
Yeah, but they have, okay, what I understand is they have landscaping requirements when they do the zoning. So when they build the building, they have landscaping requirements. They throw in these little trees, they don't water them, they die, and they never replace them. So what I'm saying is it has to be ongoing. And
Okay.
as I understood it, there was a state law that said we had to have trees, so many trees per square foot of concrete.
No, no, I haven't seen that. No. But yeah, I mean, that's what we're trying to do with this, making sure that if you're gonna have a node in a residential area, that it's softened up with landscaping, with buildings that are pedestrian scale, that are geared towards people and not necessarily cars.
Okay, but they also need to make sure that that is a code violation if they don't maintain the landscaping.
Yes, and it normally is. Yeah, it's a matter of like sometimes we may see some parking lots that are not landscaped, no trees, and they may be pre-code. But if you have a brand new development that you see that's happening, then that's something that the county would need to, go and cite them because they are supposed to maintain, and the code does say that they're supposed to maintain the landscaping as approved. So. Great. Anybody else? Any other comments in terms of design standards?
Pat, there was someone in the chat who also said they supported design standards.
Okay, cool. And I see another hand.
Barbara, if you want to unmute yourself, you should be able to do that.
I think, can you hear me now?
Can you speak up a little bit?
Find the plus sign on this thing.
I can't hear. If you want, Barbara, like if we cannot hear you, you could type it too if you want to write the question.
Okay, yes, I am very much for the design standards. We've been trying to do that for many years in our area, before they had these requirements, and, they just put a building in that it's extremely ugly. So I'm all for it.
Okay, good. Anybody else? I think it was same person.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. All right, we can move to the next one. So the next one has to do with design, with the building placement, and it's related to that simulation that I showed you earlier, where when you are a pedestrian and you're walking up and down the sidewalk, and you have to pretend like you're a car and walk in through the driveway to get there, we feel that that's not very pedestrian friendly, as opposed to the building that is closer connected to the public sidewalk. So any thoughts in terms of the building placement? Some communities allow a lot of parking in front, so the buildings are way in the back. So many times it's not just a driveway to get to the building, is you have to just go through a whole parking lot to get to the building in the back. So we were thinking about working on standards to make sure that at least in the more urban, suburban area, the buildings are closer to the road.
Pat, we had a comment, not about this slide, but the previous one, just saying that some community plans already have design standards and these should be codified in the LDC. Keystone is fortunate to have these, to which we have a thumbs up sign. So yes, understood. And just to note, this workshop is being recorded and we will be typing up meeting notes for this, and the summary will be available online if someone is not able to attend.
Okay.
So Jake C has his hand up, Pat?
Okay, go ahead.
So Jake C, I am unmuting your mic. So if you want to actually turn your mic on, you should be able to.
Hey, thank you. This is Jake Kramer at Stearns Weaver. On the building placement, I was just going to comment that a concern so I'm on the Farm Bureau board, and a concern that I hear is as you get towards the more suburban areas, or especially the rural areas, when you bring building placement to the front, it can be really hard for businesses that expect a lot of truck traffic, delivery traffic, things like that. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, that's something that we were contemplating, that it makes more sense to do that in the urban, suburban area, but when it gets to the rural area, you would expect, people coming in to buy the, loads of feed or whatever. Yeah, it wouldn't make sense to do that. So the next one has to do with tenant size limitations. And, we talked about how in the rural area, we don't allow a lot of square footage. So there was no need to say only 20,000 or 50,000 for whatever, because it's only 40,000 that they can do. But when you go into the suburban, residential, suburban, commercial, urban, general, then we started thinking, limiting to 50,000 if it is a grocery store, 20,000 for all other establishments. And we just wanted to hear comments from people about, how you feel about those tenant restrictions. And if you have any questions, or if you understood why we felt the need to do that. No takers. All right, Ron. Go ahead, Ron. You can unmute yourself.
Yep.
this is Dave Mechanic. I could comment on that.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead, David.
I'm thinking about a client who is proposing self-storage, and to some extent, those uses don't make sense unless they have a large enough facility that they can serve an entire neighborhood. And I would say that self-storage in today's market is predominantly, if not exclusively, neighborhood serving, because there are so many of them dotting the county that they have to attract people from the immediate area. So, I saw in the suburban, one of the charts you showed was at 110,000 feet, which might be a reasonable cap for that. But then I just heard you talk about 40,000, and I'm not sure where you're heading with it.
Yeah, the 40,000 was for the rural area. Let me just come back to here. Actually, it's 20,000 for the rural area and 50,000 for the residential 2-acre lots. If it
But
is
suburban,
a suburban area, it's 110. Yes.
Yeah, which is, I think, probably okay. That might be fine.
Now, in terms of the neighborhood uses, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Melissa and Nick and Andrea, but we are defining the uses as those uses that you would need on a day-to-day basis, where you go get your haircut, or you go buy your groceries, or get your nails done, or buy your your medicines. So things like gas stations, drive-throughs, or self-storage, those are not the types of uses that you walk and then come back home. A self-storage type of use is one that people are always going to drive there. So they don't have to be within walking distance from their homes.
So does that mean that's not considered neighborhood serving, or?
No, that means that you would not be a neighborhood serving use. What it means is that if you wanted to do a self-storage facility, you would need to request a change to the comprehensive plan. It would not qualify under, let's just get a rezoning and build it. It would take a 2-step process. Go ahead.
A change to the comprehensive plan if you do not already have the land use you need to do that, right? So
Which would be non-residential type. If you have either one of the neighborhood mixed, one of the mixed use districts, or the office commercial land use designation.
all right.
And Dave, if you're a little confused, Dave, feel free to give me a call and we can talk through the chart and the table and like the existing or the allowable uses under each flu category. I know it's a little bit confusing. I'd be happy to help you.
Yeah, and then you can look at an actual map and location.
Yeah, I just recall that, and I've had a few projects where nobody disputed the idea that self-storage was a neighborhood serving use.
Mhm.
So obviously you're talking about making changes, and I would be concerned about that as a change in the policy. But Melissa, I'll be happy to call you.
Okay.
Melissa, could you include Jake or me on that call with David? Because I'm a little confused about that. Every self-storage hereafter is going to require a comp plan amendment. I don't think that was really intended.
No,
but-
no. To be clear, Ron, that is not what we're saying at all. What we're saying in certain future land use categories today, where you could have commercial general uses, which are CG uses, you wouldn't necessarily have them with this new proposed language. But that's really, did we show the table yet? I don't know if I saw
Yes.
that.
Yes.
You did? Okay. Yeah, do you mind?
I
Can
mean,
we
we
go back
didn't
to
go
that?
into the detail, but
Right. So if you can see there, basically where that green arrow is, the ones above that in yellow and north, those would not allow the full range of CN or CG uses at all. So Res 9 and under. But with the way it's written now and this table shows, you could still do, you could still propose mini storage for Res 12 and up, as well as in the neighborhood mixed use 4 and the new category neighborhood mixed use 6. Does that make sense?
That covered half my concerns. The other half is indeed that under Res 12, like the Res 9 victim. So yes, if you could please include Jake or me when you talk to Dave about it. But that's a good start, Melissa.
Well, I mean, you can call me anytime, guys. We don't have to have a formal meeting. You can give me a call on Monday. I'm off tomorrow, but we can talk about it.
Thank you for just
Sure thing.
self-storage. Thank you, Melissa.
Yes, thank you as well.
I don't want to skip out on Barbara, who also has had
oh
her hand
yes.
up.
Mm-hmm.
Barbara, if you want to go ahead and provide your comment.
Can you hear me now?
We can. It's still a little light, but I can hear you.
I just want to say I'm very thankful that change from draft 3 to draft 4 in the rural service area to go from 40 down to 20,000 square feet per node. So I really appreciate that, because I was rather forceful in how much I didn't like the 40,000 per node last month. So I really appreciate it. And when we get to this 2-mile separation, I do have another question, but I'll wait till we get to that discussion. Thank you.
On that point, is mathematically, are there 40 or 140 affected rural nodes on this 40,000 down to 20,000? Because that was a pretty quick cut of what will be evolving needs for some real retail. I'm just wondering, that cut from 40,000 to 20,000 here at the last minute, is that 140 rural nodes being affected, and suddenly they can only build 20,000 square feet instead of the 40,000 square feet to get the third and fourth use that makes a critical mass to get any of those uses together in the evolving rural the next 10 years in Hillsborough County?
So I can actually help answer that, Ron. Andrea and I are working on some maps right now to analyze intersections that meet locational criteria today and that would meet it with the new language. Some nodes are retained, some are not. We've added some in some community plan areas and not in others, but we are working on that analysis. But as far as Barbara's comment regarding the 40,000 to 20,000 drop, the 40,000 was put in because we have a range in the rural categories today in the table under
Sorry,
objective 22.
5 to 40,
Yep. So 40, the consultant, we just discussed among ourselves and thought we would just put a number in there and get some community feedback. We did get pretty strong community feedback that the 40, we chose the higher end of the range, that was felt that it wasn't appropriate to maintain the rural character of that area. So we made the change down to 20 to reflect those comments. And in addition, it's already in the plan today. So it really wasn't that major of a change.
And that is per quadrant of the intersection, not the intersection total.
Good point.
I think we still have some hands up. I don't know if
Yeah, so if you don't mind when you're done speaking, just go ahead and lower your hand, just so I can be clear as to who's up next. But I believe Elizabeth had her hand up for a while. I know Jake, I don't know if that's left over from prior question, but Elizabeth, if you want to go ahead and speak, unmute yourself. All right, so looks like she's having a little bit of mic issues. If anyone still has a question, Barbara, Elizabeth, and Jake.
Oh my, I'm sorry, I'm unmuted now.
All right, you're
Okay.
unmuted.
Yeah,
You're
sorry.
good.
You keep talking about the nodes, and it needs to be very explicit in the writing regarding what these node criteria are, because I have visions of seeing a gas station and a Burger King on every bloody corner in a residential area. And the problem is, what I see is that you're saying that people are allowed waivers. Well, the minute you allow a waiver, you drive a Mack truck through it. And that's why I'm saying it needs to have specific, detailed definitions of a node.
Yeah, and let me just go back to that map that I mentioned before. So every time you see a road intersecting another road, that's a node, pretty much.
Okay. Well, then what you're
It's a
saying
lot.
is that, yeah, what you're saying is that you're opening up every intersection in this county for some type of commercial development, and that's not acceptable.
No, we're not opening it up. It is already open. Now we're tightening it up. We're saying, wow, we see that every intersection could potentially have that. Let's put a separation requirement so that it doesn't happen in every intersection.
Well, it needs to be detailed and explicit, because
Yeah, the
like
problem is that we could not come in and say this one yes, this one no, this one yes, this one no, because a lot of it relies on the market. What if we say this one yes, but the property owner doesn't want to sell, doesn't want to do anything with it? In the meantime, this guy comes in and says, I want to build a Publix here. So, we can say when you have the intersection, that's your first step. Now, number two, what is the land use around you? Maybe that is going to determine your size and other details. And but yeah, I mean, and then the separation requirement. So we're trying to make it a little bit more tight in the sense that we don't want every intersection to turn commercial.
Yes, but when you put down the thing that everybody can come in and get a waiver,
yes, and the waiver they have specific criteria. It's saying, like, if we're looking at a node separation waiver, it can only be because maybe the use makes more sense. What if this guy here has a Home Depot, but this guy wants to put a Publix? It's like, oh, we really need a Publix in that area. We could not deny him, even though he's that close to the Home Depot. So that's the type of criteria that we would use to say, yeah, let's waive the distance requirement or the separation requirement. So yeah, that was one of the things that we wanted to address, to fix the fact that right now it can almost be every intersection.
Okay.
And it's not. So go ahead.
Yeah, I also have a question then. If you're going to make it a commercial, what's the traffic criteria? Because once you put the commercial, you're going to increase traffic there, and you don't need that in next door to neighborhoods.
Yeah, that's something that when you do the rezoning, because that's, definitely you have to go through rezoning to do something like this. It goes to a public hearing, it gets reviewed, transportation people get involved. And if at the hearing or during the review process, they realize that there is no way we can support a commercial use here, the roadway is already over capacity, they could deny it.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I've been involved in a lot of zoning hearings. And from what I understand, Scott got rid of every traffic requirement when he was elected governor. They do zoning when school is out with the traffic. And basically, the traffic is irrelevant unless it is absolutely gridlocked 24/7. Unless the road is already failing when they want to put something in, the traffic is approved, and that's again not acceptable.
Yeah, but that's something that needs to be incorporated into the review.
Yes.
So going back to this one, so the next question that I had here was gas stations. We've been going back and forth, and like I mentioned before, we don't see gas stations as a neighborhood pedestrian friendly type of use. It's not the place that you don't walk to. But then we were wondering, what about rural areas? Is that something that you would want to have at certain intersections? Should we open the doors for that? Or in any of the other, go ahead.
I'm sorry. In a county the size of Rhode Island, I'm not sure how you're going to have none for that last 20 miles of it.
You're not sure how you're going to have what?
In a county the size of Rhode Island, I am not certain how you're going to have none the last 20 miles of it going south and east, especially east. I'm just not sure I understand how you could preclude gas stations in the rural areas of Hillsborough County.
No, and we're talking about the residential, agricultural designated areas. If they have the appropriate designation, it would be a different story. Or if there is an area where they see that a node could be located, then they could change the land use map, the future land use map. So, like always, we have to remind ourselves that it's with this objective, what the county is doing is putting commercial in an area that is designated for residential use. And it's something that you wouldn't really see on a map, on a future land use map. It would all show as residential. So, but like I mentioned before, we're limiting some of the uses. What Melissa mentioned, that table, it says limited neighborhood commercial, meaning no drive-throughs, no gas stations, no vehicle repair. So we're trying to just have a conversation today, how people feel about, gas stations in rural areas. Is that a use that people want to see, or they don't really want to have the gas stations that close?
We do have 3 hand raised, Pat.
Okay.
So as we go through these hands, feel free to unmute your mic, Barbara. And then if you just want to start with whether or not you would support that, whether gas stations in rural areas is appropriate, and then your question if it's unrelated to this discussion.
Well, having 3 gas stations in the Keystone Odessa Community Plan, how can I say no, there cannot be any? Because I agree with Ron, you got to have one gas station. I think what I would object to is these blown out racetrack, Wawas, whatever else, a scaled down gas station. But I don't know if that's cost effective for that industry. So I think you're going to have 1 or 2. So I think we're going to have to address it as, okay, Ron, I'm agreeing with you.
Thank you, Barbara. Yes, the Keystone, they save lives, literally, I think, in Keystone. If you've ever walked 8 miles for gas, it saves some lives.
Thank you. I haven't had to.
Anybody else?
Barbara, I don't believe you. I think that's a different person. Barbara, you're still first in line. There's multiple Barbaras in this chat, but it's just Barbara Guest.
Okay, that was a while back, and I was agreeing with Elizabeth that okay. I just don't like the idea of having, like a McDonald's, the smell that would go over that neighborhood. And if you've ever sat there and you have to believe that the rest of your life you're going to be smelling hamburger frying, and also, drive-through speakers, outdoor speakers that you have to listen to, 20 hours a day. So, but like I said, that was on the previous page. And the gas stations, I don't have an opinion on.
Excellent. Jake, you had your hand up for a while. Thank you for being patient.
Yeah, thank you. I think my comment was similar to Ron's on the gas stations, that I think at least some are needed. I had my hand raised earlier, so I don't want to sidetrack the discussion at this point. But I just wanted to, comment on it's the comprehensive plan process to amend it is, it's not cheap and it takes a long time. And, I'm just having trouble fundamentally understanding why we're, increasing so many of these limitations, especially the removal of the uses from the first 6 or so categories that were shown on that chart. Because, the board polices this today, right, through the PD process. And so just, trying to understand why we're removing some of those uses and requiring an additional hurdle of a comp plan amendment. So, you can answer that now or later, but I just want to put that out there from the discussion earlier. Thanks.
I think, like over the years, certain uses have been approved where the neighbors have not been excited about, that they didn't feel like they were prepared to have certain uses within their residential area. And I think when staff came to us, it was also the fact that so many waivers are being requested and, things are getting approved without, real concern for, what we're putting at some of these intersections. So it was a matter of, let's look at what we have today and see if we can improve it in terms of what the purpose of it of the objective is. And when we read it the first time, it was like, if this is the objective, why are we allowing what we're allowing already? So, like if the purpose was to just allow commercial, then we need to completely change the purpose of it. It's not a, neighborhood serving commercial locational criteria. It's just any commercial locational criteria. And I don't know, Melissa, if you have any other background that you want to address in terms of, why we got to this point. Uh-oh, she had to go. I think there may be somebody knocking on her door.
And it's just not lost on us that, yes, amending the future land use map is a longer process than just a standard rezoning for commercial use. That is part of the balance that, we're trying to figure out. If you're going to have a gas station, which is typically a more complex and often more controversial use, maybe we're talking internally whether that should have to go through a little bit more of an extensive public process than, just a neighborhood grocery mom and pop shop, which is rare, but something that is a little less controversial.
And something else that I wanted to mention too, part of this project, we started looking at other communities in the state, and then we expanded it to communities in the country to see who else is allowing commercial uses within residential areas. And very, very few examples that we found that people are doing that. Like most places would require you to have a comprehensive plan amendment and a rezoning. So, that's when we realized that, yeah, this is an incentive that, what the county has right now.
But doesn't that cut the other direction though? I mean, I was under the impression the planning profession was moving away from single use, vast swaths of single use, like we used to do, into integrating more, mixed use projects and mixed use areas.
Yes.
And so I'm just, I just wanted to push back a little bit that I'm not so sure looking at other jurisdictions means that it's a great idea. It may be, but it's just it just
and
seems
when
like go ahead.
Well,
Sorry.
Yeah, when we found that out, we commended them for doing this because we're headed the right direction. In other comprehensive plans that we have worked on, we didn't call the future land use categories residential 2, residential 4, residential 6. They were like neighborhood, because a neighborhood is supposed to include different types of uses, not just houses. But the question is, planners also like to rely on the transect idea that if it is a rural area, the uses, the atmosphere, the bulk, the setbacks, the openness is different than when you're in a more suburban area or the urban area. So it's a matter of scaling things back so that, like when we're talking about a use locating at the corner of my subdivision, right there next to my subdivision, all of a sudden it's going to be a furniture store. Like, what does that have to do with neighborhood? There are other uses that I would rather have there, and I don't want them to be taken away with the Home Depot, which, when I go to Home Depot, I take my car because typically I need the space to, carry the stuff. So, that we have to go back to basics and like, what are we trying to do? Okay, so this is stuff that we're letting into very low density residential areas. 4 dwelling units per acre, 6 dwelling units per acre. At what point do we want to change that map? Because it's, if it is a community level use, it doesn't really, it's not typically a part of a neighborhood. It's part of a node, an activity node. And that's why we're creating mixed use districts, not single use districts, because we feel that when you have a neighborhood mixed use 4 or neighborhood mixed use 6, we still want the residential, but it's a residential that is, at a scale with these types of commercial uses.
Patricia, two quick points to your and Jake's great point. I think that other jurisdictions and Jake are trying to signal you that in order to make this work as a balanced outcome for this study, you're going to really need to reconsider the fact that a lot of that residential is by default, and now to blame some of these heavy rules on it's in a residential neighborhood, and other jurisdictions limit commercial in the residential neighborhood. It means we haven't ever had the time or the insight, and I've been doing this for 48 years. We have all failed for 48 years to put the right 5 or 15 mixed use places out where I'm talking about. And thank you, Barbara, for your help out there, as it were, in the rural areas. Bottom line is we haven't brought the mixed use where it ought to be. We've never gotten around to it. Now we come along and these harsh rules are not finding the necessary place that those other jurisdictions have, which is the smart 5, 10, or 15 mixed use places where they ought to be. They are by default residential, and I'm part of the problem for 48 years.
Yeah, and you mentioned rural, and I think the rural community has been the most vocal throughout this process.
I really meant most of the residential, candidly. I'm really talking about 3/4 of the county here. I'm talking about the predominantly residential parts of the county in my point, and the rural is semi-irrelevant.
Okay, I see. Melissa or Andrea, do you have anything else to add, or Nick?
I have. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I've had my hand up for a while, but going back to Jake's point about a plan amendment, I think that's if you will, an illusory option. If somebody cannot make the commercial locational criteria, to think that he or she is going to be able to then solve the problem by getting a plan amendment is just not realistic. That would become, I could hear and rightfully so, the neighborhood would say, well, they're just circumventing the commercial locational criteria. My point being is, if you feel as if there are circumstances that would warrant consideration, favorable consideration, build them into the criteria. Don't say, oh, just go get a plan amendment, because that's a big deal. That's not
a supermajority vote.
Likely.
And it now takes a supermajority vote. The county commission has decided it's not 4 out of 7 votes, it's 5 out of 7 votes. So sending folks to that illusory process where it takes 5 instead of 4 votes out of 7 every time, every amendment, no matter what size or what you're after.
These points are very well taken. I don't want this message to be today that either you meet these or we want you to go do a plan amendment. That is not what we're saying at all. We're just saying if you don't meet it, that's an option for you to do a plan amendment, but we're not designing this language. So the plan amendment change is a tool. That is not the perspective that we're trying to give here. So we apologize if that's the way this is coming off, but it is an option to do a plan amendment as it is today and always. But that is not what we're not trying to encourage people to change their future land use category from one thing to another so that their uses would be allowed.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that is not a realistic option in this scenario here at all. So,
Well, Melissa, when this was presented at the Planning Commission last week and 2 months ago, unfortunately, the language I wrote down is the following. I'm going to quote it. If you can't make the square footage, you can't vary it, period. Go and get a comp plan amendment, period. That was what was in my notes, wasn't it, Jake? From that meeting, those two meetings. So the bottom line is that I usually agree with you, Melissa, but in this one, I've heard these presentations a time or two, and they said what I just said, which is you want to change the square footage, which is coming down dramatically in ways we're trying to talk about. Tough, you can't waive it. Go get a comprehensive plan amendment, not a rezoning, mind you. Go get a comprehensive plan amendment. And that's now taking 5 votes in Hillsborough County are the 4 problems that are George Clooney's perfect storm here.
So just to be clear today with the language that's adopted, the square footage and the quadrants is not waivable. The board can waive any other quality of the CLC right now, but they may not waive the square footage. There's an express sentence written in objective 22.8, I want to say, that says that. So I'm not sure where that language came from. I don't hope that I didn't say that because it doesn't sound familiar to me.
No, that's the language I've read a couple of times in the presentations. It says, if you can't make the square footage, you cannot waive it. And if you want to change it, you have to go and get a comprehensive plan amendment to a category that allows a different square footage. You cannot waive it.
Right, but what I'm telling you is that's how it is today. The square footage cannot be waived today. The board does not have that option.
I reread it night before last, and it says square footage cannot be waived under either the old or the new versions. You couldn't waive square footage heretofore, and you will not be able to waive square footage under these proposed drafts. And then it told me what I could waive, which was placement of my building. So the same sentence said, but you may waive your placement of your building. You may not waive your square footage now, and you may not waive your square footage in this proposed draft.
Right, so we are not changing that. That is exactly my point.
But I'm saying it's one of the 4 parts of the perfect storm. It's a persisting part of the perfect storm that was a problem heretofore, but you've added 3 layers of this perfect storm to that not waivability of the square footage, which is why we're all on this call.
Right.
Okay.
Well, to try and finish my point, this is David. Whatever we do here, we need to make sure the waiver criteria allow for circumstances that, you know, you can't have a black and white check off the box test, but circumstances where you would say, yeah, this makes sense to put this at this location. We need to have criteria that would allow for that kind of analysis. That's really all I'm trying to say. You
know? And that's a great point. And like I said, I'm taking notes on that now. Elizabeth has had her hand up for a little while, so I just want to make sure we get to her. And Pat, as I'm sure you know, there are other slides that are left to go. And so we can circle back on this conversation when it comes time to get to the discussion or the post-meeting discussion, but there's still other slides and people may not want to hear this part of it, but this is still a really good conversation.
Yeah, I would like to circle back to gasoline stations. I mean, I think that there should be a very high criteria to put a gasoline station on an undeveloped piece of property, because once you put a gasoline station on there, you've destroyed the land. And right now, in my community, we actually have 3 gas stations in one corner. You don't need 3 gas stations in a corner, in one intersection. I mean, I'm from the Midwest, and I'm from farm country, and you take care of your land, and you put gasoline stations every 10 feet or whatever. you're destroying the land. Like I said, I think there should be a very high mark to put a gas station on a new piece of property. And
Well, I think that doesn't take into account current regulations regarding gas stations. I don't.
Pat, we can circle back if you want to move on to the next slide.
Sure, let's do
I
that.
know people want to know when the hearing process is, so, and how to get to the website again. So,
All right, so another item of discussion that we've had is what happens to office uses. And there is another objective that talks about where you can have office uses that they don't have to be necessarily at nodes. So that is addressed somewhere else. But then for the nodes, some people have said, what's wrong with having offices at the corners instead of being part of a shopping center? So that's something else that we're putting out here for discussion. Could, one corner be a shopping center, the other corner could be a grocery store, and then another corner could be a bank or, State Farm agent building or, financial institution. So that's something that we wanted to just open it up for comments. And the way that we see offices, again, is that it's great to have them within walking distance, but the likeliness of the people living next to this office, that they work in this office, is it really realistic? And again, it's taking space from those daily need uses that we've been talking about. Does anybody have any strong feelings about office development?
May I raise my hand on that? And I'll go after anyone else who has.
Go ahead.
absolutely.
I was going to bring that up because I've been a member of the National Association of Industrial and Office Properties for about 40 years. And I've spoken to office uses maybe 15 or 20 times during those 40 years. And I must confess that up in Carrollwood, we tried to get people to not commute to Carrollwood by building what are known as the Bushwood, dozen buildings of about 2 million square feet. So many Carrollwood people can go to work 2 or 4 miles away and not commute. All of that has meant that there are locations where office ought to be, and suburban office parks and areas, and not always in huge scales to meet your definitions of the larger, concentration areas where there will be larger amounts. And then I was concerned, candidly, when I read the words office where residential is unsuitable or undevelopable, which means you're using a North Star of residential unsuitability or non-developability for the fate of office, instead of thinking smartly, as I tried to say a while ago, with those 5 or 10 or 15 ideal places for mixed use that we've never gotten around to designating, or, county commission receptiveness to doing the right thing by that subject. And I just think that office is getting victimized here in ways that I can't even understand.
So I think, sorry, go ahead.
Or Jake, am I overstating that one about office?
Yeah, I wanted to clarify the part about the unsuitable for residential. Sometimes when a subdivision is built, there are some leftover pieces on the major road that maybe for some reason they couldn't buy them, or they were, occupied by another use that was active at that moment. But later on, that use goes away. And then we're saying, even though they're not at intersections, even though we want, all these uses to go to activity centers, those leftover pieces, they'll be fine for you for office. You don't have to do the comp plan amendment. The offices could locate in those sites.
Thank you. That half mitigates my concern. I still have the big concern, but thank you for mitigating half of my concern, Patricia. I still have the other concerns about office and the need to have mixed use places that encourage the office instead of it being so vague. A lot of people are trying to find it in the applications. I think you've heard that the previous 3 meetings. I understand that a lot of people are having trouble figuring out where office will be allowed ever, except in the huge, regional centers, et cetera.
And again, like what Melissa noted earlier, here we're mostly talking about the lower density residential areas. Like if you go 9 or 12 and above, then it's not an issue.
Right. I think the residential 9 victim comes up about every time we talk about anything.
I think David has a comment, or who else?
Dave does have his hand raised, so if you want to unmute your mic.
Yeah, I have a brief comment on that. Office is about the most benign use you can have adjacent to a residential area. Those buildings close down 5, 6 o'clock every night, and there's no noise and no impact to the neighborhood. So I wouldn't put them at a disadvantage. I understand the idea from an economic development standpoint that you don't want offices at every intersection, but there's nothing inherently objectionable about an office being near or adjacent to a residential use.
Yeah, we're not disagreeing with you. We agree. It's not an issue of compatibility. And we even have language that would say, like, if your most intensive uses would be right at the intersection, and then the offices could be used as transition uses between the commercial and the residential. What we were afraid was of somebody coming in like this building and occupying a whole node with an office, not leaving space for grocery stores, cafes, personal services. And if you have 4 corners and all of a sudden all 4 corners are used for office, then you lost an opportunity here. So that was the main concern that we were trying to address.
I just want to make a note that Kim put in the chat. If it is a large business, I disagree. You could have office building with a ton of employees that would cause traffic issues in the morning and evening when people are coming and going. All right. No more.
And then, and we can keep talking, but I wanted to show this slide now because this is the plan from here on. So again, like I mentioned, we're working on the draft. We're making changes. We're refining it, getting comments from county staff, getting comments from different departments. And we will have that draft to staff prior to the hearing, but the Planning Commission hearing is planned for August 8th. And then the Board of County Commissioners would have a hearing on August 11th. And then the adoption would be October 13th. So that's the plan as of right now. Originally, when were we supposed to do this? I think it was maybe June, and we have extended it so that we can allow for more public input. But these are the dates to keep in mind. And again, you know, like if you have more questions after this meeting, you know, feel free to contact Melissa or Andrew. And I'm going to leave this slide up while we're talking, but in case anybody needs their phone numbers or email addresses. But again, you know, we can still continue asking questions, giving comments. You know, we still have some time left.
May I ask about CG and auto supply, auto repair, and all the drive-throughs for the next 20 years? A little question about all the drive-throughs and all the auto supply and auto repair. Did I read policy 22.3 to say never another CG where it isn't now? In other words, we're dead in the water as to where we, the last 40 years, have accidentally put enough CG. Did I misread 22.3 on the fatality of never another CG? Everything's got to be CN from now on, and if you're lucky enough to hold a CG, you might be vested unless you expand. And then the definition of expansion doesn't meet any legal expansion test I can remember about magnitude of expansion. It just says expansion in some gobbledygook that doesn't tell me whether or not 100 more square feet or 1,000 more square feet is an expansion, meaning that even that's going to be subjected to these new rules, even though it's technically an existing approval or even an existing shopping area. Did I misread 22.3? Others on the call?
22.3.
22.3. It's the no more CGs, just CNs. Unless you've already got your CG, then henceforth you'll be getting CNs. You will not be getting any more CGs. I hope I didn't misread it. And I hope I did misread it. It's 22.3 about never again CGs. Only CN. CGs equals drive-throughs, auto supply, auto repair, which are not allowed in the CN, and is obviously part of the residential 9 victimization that a lot of people are very concerned about, which is the residential 9 victimization that you cannot in residential 9, which is one of the more intense categories, have any CG, which means you can't have any auto supply, auto repair, the O'Reillys and the Pet Boys and the dozen other things that are basic commerce, nor any of the drive-throughs, which are again about 80% of the new would-be restaurants. And all of those are precluded in 2 or 3 different ways, and I'll get to in a moment. But for now, I just want to focus on 22.3 on the no more CGs.
Okay, so if you look at the table that is on the screen,
yes,
if you are in industrial, rural, agricultural, rural, residential, 2 to 9, you can only do CN, and you're going to be limited by that policy.
Yes.
If you're in the neighborhood mixed use 4 or the new 6, you can do CN or CG.
But you can't add a CG to any of those first 8 categories.
No. This table is going to be prevailing.
Good for the last years, but you cannot going forward. But let me just make that note. I don't want to take all the time. I know others want to speak, so let me just cut to the chase. That my 5 major concerns are that one about how many places you've precluded drive-throughs and auto supply and auto repair, which in many cases are about the only kind of commerce that some communities are going to get. If you've ridden in rural Florida, you'll notice that you're lucky that the food deserts are basically that first Arby's or that first Burger King, that first McDonald's or that whatever, and it's usually a first Arby's or first Church's Chicken, and it is the end of the food desert for hundreds of major rural communities all over Florida. But these drive-throughs preclusions, I mean, they go beyond anything I think I've ever seen anywhere. And then secondly, we've expressed concerns about some of the categories with respect to the nature of some of these node differences where, and again, my point on North Dale Mabry is this. Have you ever ridden North Dale Mabry in Tampa, Patricia or Nick?
I've been there, but I can't say often now.
Nick, have you ridden North Dale Mabry in Tampa?
I grew up in Hillsborough County.
Good. Well, that's what I wanted to hear. And you spoke well with Jake, which is a good idea. And so the bottom line is, if there were 4 cross streets in Carrollwood and you had intersections, a lot of the best shopping centers, including the first community center, which was the first theater in Carrollwood for all of us for 30 years, was off of the intersections. And there were 5 or 10 other very fine shopping centers. Almost all the good ones were off of the intersections. And that's where the retail and some of this other and some office I talked about 8 minutes ago goes to the nature of the fact that the springs, the fountains, the gazebos, the first theater, and a dozen other good things in North Dale Mabry were not at the intersection. They were off intersection. So if you preclude another one for a mile or two, even if it's only a mile, but especially if it's 2 miles further north on Dale Mabry, then you basically precluded what could be the ideal location for ideal combination of retail uses with critical masses that might be 35 or 55,000 square feet, as 18 of those shopping centers are. Critical mass, not 20, not 40, but somewhere between 55 and 85,000 square feet. And half of them are not on, 3/4 of the good ones are not on the intersections. And what I'm thinking is in 15 or 20 years, we're going to look back and see that we've limited our ability to have a natural positive evolution of the right kind of development on the roads of much of Hillsborough County that will be the next 5 Dale Mabrys the next 30 years. Am I overstating that one, David or Jake? So thank you for letting me comment.
Yeah, I'm sure they agree with you. Maybe their mics are muted.
I think Barbara's typing a comment.
Good. Jake no longer has access to the chat. I think I singed most of the ether on these connections.
Barbara wrote, would not like to see Gun Highway in the RSA and would not like to see look like Dale Mabry. Sorry, Ron, which is.
I know it has bad centers. I acknowledge half of the centers are bad, but that doesn't take away from the 8 good ones. And the 8 good ones that were off of the intersections are the nature of the nodal separation, which I alluded to earlier. Bottom line is that you need to be smart about where these 5, 10, or 15 concentrations of mixed use ought to be. So we'll have the good centers in Dale Mabry and none of the bad centers on North Dale Mabry. So I'm agreeing absolutely with the chat box.
And then Kim also agreed with Barbara's previous comment, but thank you.
Any other comments, suggestions, recommendations? Was there anything, Andrea, that we wanted to ask tonight that we may have missed?
I would like to make one last comment, please, and I apologize
Okay.
for taking so much time
No
here.
problem.
But several people have asked me to from several different groups and organizations and other lawyers that have other hearings, and the last one has to do with the nature of the 20,000 square feet. I'm not sure that you've realized that to limit a tenancy in, I think, half of these districts, you can count them, to limit the tenancy to 20,000, any one tenant to 20,000 square feet, that means that you're taking those Marshalls and those others that are just 25 or 30,000 square feet, and absolutely the best products in many cases, because they're the middle brand, the middle price, and sometimes the lower price. They're the middle brand, the middle price, and sometimes the lower price, and like Big Lots, etc. And they're not big boxes, but they're the 50 or 60 things that enable you at 25 or 35 or 45,000 square feet, like Big Lots or Marshalls and a dozen other brands, to actually handle the commerce between the big ones and the little ones. And if those are 25, 35, 45, take those away from Hillsborough County, would seem to me that the tenancy 20,000 needs to be case by case, or at least some kind of set of performance standards to earn 45 or 55,000 square feet of critical mass, which is back to North Dale Mabry, the nature of a viable concentration and the nature of the 6 or 8 of the best of the North Dale Mabry stores, which went on North Dale Mabry because they are 25, 35, 45,000 square feet, best one-stop place to do any commerce in North Dale Mabry. Performance standards to earn 25, 35, or 45,000 square foot tenant. And this is not another one of our anti-big box discussions we've had for the last 20 years, 3 or 4 major times. This is not an anti-big box discussion. This is a viable retail where you need it for the people to have in their community that urgently needed viable retail 25, 35, 45,000 square feet stuff earned per tenant.
So looking at the table, all those would be allowed from NMU 4 all the way up in those land use categories.
Yeah, but not the middle range where a lot of this is already currently. The accumulation of history with much of Hillsborough County is that we haven't gotten around to creating those categories for much of the moderately rural areas and the new areas that evolved where we've built 2,000 or 3,000, 5,000 houses. And now it's time to bring their commercial up to speed. And before we do bring their natural commercial up to speed, we run into this hard stop wall of something that's ideal and utopian, and would have been great if we'd had these mixed use centers and we'd had these higher categories put where they're belonging in much of Hillsborough County, but we haven't yet. And when we go to do so, this will stop us. Or it'll be 5 votes required, or the perfect storm if we do try to create those areas. The 4 parts of George Clooney's perfect storm, including 5 votes to amend comp plan in order to try to do some of this against all these other rules. So, including like node separation, for example, you find 2 perfect locations and they're 0.8 of a mile apart. Or you find 2 perfect locations from every imaginable standard and they're 1.6 miles apart in the rural area for the next 5 or 15 years of the only smart planning you could do in that neighborhood. And there's 2 of them perfect and they're 0.8 of a mile apart inside the urban areas, and they're 1.8 miles apart in the rural areas, and they'll run into the second of the 4 parts of the perfect storm.
But Ron, you can ask for a waiver to separation between nodes, which is why we're putting that in the language. So that's something that you can argue and, sorry,
Justify.
But not the
children
square
coming in
footage
here.
but not
That's
the
something
square
that, yes, you
footages
can.
either. You're right. That's a good answer on the nodal separation. Although I saw some curiosity whether or not even the nodal separation was really waivable, because the catch of no adverse impact on any neighbor. No, I'm sorry. There's no adverse there. No impact on neighbor and not strip commercial. Quite frankly, the definition of strip commercial is about anything you could do between nodes, because it uses the word linear and 4 other words which are fatal to the perfect storm. And I'll read them to you. They are linear, multiple entrances, parking, and car centric. There's not a lot of stuff that you could build at the perfect location that's not one or all 4 of those definitions of strip commercial: linear, car centric, emphasis parking, etc. That's the nature of the commerce that we're now talking about. And that one is not waivable in the fatality vis-a-vis the node being only one of the 4 parts of the perfect storm that your meteorologist has calmed. Not that I feel strongly about this.
Ron, I will say the current draft 4 language that's on our website does have the minimum separation waiver language does say that if it's determined that the new node will not result in strip commercial and will not have a detrimental effect on the surrounding neighborhoods.
Okay, the draft
You could argue that.
I didn't see the word detrimental in my draft here. I just reread it for this meeting, but I'll read it to you. It's no effect upon the, maybe it was your summary, and to that extent, Andrew, you make a great point, and I appreciate your helping correct that part.
Just wanted you to know that isn't in the draft language.
Thank you, Andrew. That was helpful. The tornado is only a 7, not an 8. Hurricanes is a 4, it's not a 5.
So, Ron, I just wanted to ask you, so in your eyes, do you think that the way that the commercial locational criteria is worded today, it should stay that way?
Oh, well, candidly, no, it's no better as it is, except it just happens to let you do the right thing at the right location without some artificial, 4 or 5 perfect storm impediments, which means in effect, when you get to the right location, it's been prepared for you by what some would call careless over preparation or whatever, or over aspiration or whatever you call it, or a county commission not paying enough attention 5, 10, 15, 25 years ago. But no, the short answer is that what we have is twice as good, only because it's not 5 times as perfect storm restrictive. I mean, it doesn't have any of the 4 ingredients of the perfect storm. It has natural magnitudes of 175,000 square feet except, and it has about 40 different locations, only about 2 or 5 of which would make my 15 perfect places that y'all probably all agree to, but which we're not going to get because we're not going to get 5 votes or pass 4 or 5 other rules that trip us on the way to a perfect natural mixed use perfection, which has ironically not the right relationship to the Simon Says of the nodes and the other 3 parts of the perfect storm, including adverse impact, detrimental effect on neighbors, which is almost anything you can do at any hour for any commerce, and candidly, the strict definition of linear, car-centric, parking emphasis, etc., is also known as commerce, also known as any retail. Therefore, the prohibition of strip retail is also the prohibition of the solution to the problem. And since we don't now have that prohibition of strip by that definition, nor any of these other 4 parts of the perfect storm, yes, what we have is better for someone to come along and do a perfect location for a perfect size with the perfect mix of uses and the perfect number of access points, just by default of having prepared that potentiality over the last 40 years.
Hey, Ron, do I need to raise my hand so I can talk? I just wanted to say you've referred repeatedly to like a great mixed use development, and Res 9 and under, that's not where we see a mixed use development typically. There's not enough FAR or density available in those categories to really cultivate a true integrated and connected mixed use development. So I'm not sure if you're talking about a flu category that would perhaps already allow it, as you see down here, this full range of CN and CG, that is shown for Res 12 and up, including NMU4 and the new category of NMU6, and it wouldn't touch the existing uses that are allowed in the mixed use categories, which we have several of. So I just wanted to I want to point out again that we're talking about Res 9 and below.
And talking about the perfect mixed use, there is a provision that states that if you're doing a mixed use development, a lot of these things don't apply. So like if you have your internal connections and mixing residential with commercial, there's a lot more that you could do that way. Any other comments, questions? Anything online, Nick?
Nope, no more hands are raised and nothing more in the chat. However, Ron did want to provide a response.
Okay.
Oh, figuring out the mic, it looks like.
No, I'm sorry I've said so much tonight. I apologize.
Not a problem.
That's what it's for.
Yep. And again, Melissa and Andrea can, talk to you guys on the phone if you want more information or have any other questions that may pop up after this meeting. All right. So
thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for coming. We appreciate
for
it.
attending. So it's always helpful when we have people that we can talk and discuss these things because we don't want to do all this in a vacuum. Thank you so much.
And I'll send I'll send Elizabeth a copy of George Clooney's Perfect Storm movie, and we'll watch the
Can't say that I've seen that one.
I have.
There's certainly a storm brewing outside right now. My lights are flickering a bit.
Oh, I must have sent it your way.
Yeah,
I think you did send it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And the recording and the comments will be available in probably early next week.
Yes, thank you all for attending. This was really informative. Great comments. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.